Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Automated, our weekly podcast that we've now recorded 2 weeks in a row. Sitting next to me is someone who's made a lot of fun of me today, but I'm incredibly pleased to be joined by someone who actually knows what he's talking about. A mysterious internet stranger who's only been waiting to start this podcast with us for 22 minutes. Can you please introduce yourself?
I'm David LaRose. I'm from Carnegie Robotics, and we've been, I guess that's about as much intro as I prepared.
Hey, well, I guess, what does Carnegie do for the 5 people on the planet Earth who have not heard of Carnegie Robotics?
Right on. We're a robotics company in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We started in 2010. We're a spin out from Carnegie Mellon University. All of the founders of Carnegie Robotics were some flavor of faculty at Carnegie Mellon, and we do like a mix of. For a long time, we did tech development as a big part of our revenue mix. More recently, we've been leaning heavily into product. We supply components to robotics providers. We develop autonomy for bespoke robotics applications, and generally work to enable robotics in mostly the U.S. right now, but we have some international presence.
Awesome.
So I'm really excited to David to have you on the podcast. So for those who are tuning in, Carnegie Robotics is despite David's incredibly obnoxious sales pitch of himself, because he's so effusive and braggadocious as his primary character traits. Carnegie Robotics is one of the best companies in robotics. They've been building very real robots, very real components, very real tech progress for 15 plus years. Everything they lack in obnoxious fake videos of robots that aren't real, they actually make up for in very, very real, in the weeds, actual robots that actually do stuff. We've had the pleasure of talking to David, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 15 times, and every single time that we've talked to you thus far, we've ended up on some really interesting tangents and some really interesting big dropping of a bunch of things that you know and have worked on and deep technical insight. So now that I, of course, have talked you up so much, you'll have only even smaller shoes to fill on the podcast. But I really, I've been trying to convince you to join us on this for a while, and hope my obnoxiousness in it doesn't make you feel a little like a mistake. But thank you so much for joining us, and I'm excited to hop into it. So,
kicking off with a personal question, what sort of childhood trauma or past life bad deeds caused you to go into robotics?
As into a respectable profession like web development or sharing pictures of kittens online.
Well, robotics has been incredibly kind to me, so I think of it mostly as good fortune that I'm here. But it wasn't a straight path. I was a liberal arts undergrad, and when I left college, I wanted to do something to help mostly people with amputees. Mm-hmm. And I thought, man, if I could only make automated prosthetics. Mm-hmm. So then through just a bunch of good luck, I wound up working at IBM Research, developing medical robotics and tools for computer-assisted surgery. And then that led me to Carnegie Mellon University, and that led me to Carnegie Robotics. And
it's amazing. Yeah. I had no idea.
Awesome. Yeah, I had no idea about that either.
Yeah.
There's actually quite an overlap in the robotics and prosthetics space.
Yeah. And I know there's a couple of companies. Yeah. But I like that. I got into robotics because I thought I could make a quick buck on trucks. Whereas David was like, oh, maybe I can make these people who can't walk without assistance, feel more free in their world.
Well, the crazy thing is that time, I'm telling you how old I am now, but at that time, when I got into robotics, I was looking for ways to obfuscate it in case it was a flash in the pan. Like when I went for graduate school, I had to decide which program to join in Carnegie Mellon. And I was like, if I do the robotics program, I could be out of a job in 5 years. At least if I do electrical engineering, I've got plausible deniability. I can say I work on power systems.
Yeah, I had the same call with mechatronics versus electrical. It's like, who the hell knows what a mechatronics engineering is? So all you listening folks who are dropping out of school to do ChatGPT wrappers, maybe take David's wise advice here.
Well, maybe I'll do a quick overview of our podcast for those who have stumbled into this for the first time. This is automated. We talk about robots every week. First, we're going to play a game where we invent a robot from scratch and then kind of will it into existence. And then we're going to talk honestly mostly about David's career, Carnegie Robotics, what things he's seen along the way, fun robot demos. Selling their first ever government contract, which instantly went really well and is now a robot that's used all the time, where there's no sarcasm in that at all, with how much of a straight line it is to sell to the government, and stories about kind of going from 2010 when they started the company to now, both where they thought Carnegie would be by now, where it is, and where they thought robotics would be by now, and what's been surprising along the way. But that's all too serious for now. Let's play a game where let's make up a robot.
So we have completely unbiasedly randomly picked.
Yeah.
What was it? Machine learning for space exploration?
Yep.
Or generically AI agents for space exploration? Yeah, let's do it a little bit more VC fundable. What is it called? Foundational models for space exploration.
Yeah.
That's how it is. All right.
And David, I don't know if there's anywhere you want to take this initially. I have lots of ideas. But we can start with one of yours.
Well, this is my first time playing the game,
Yep.
so I think you should lead and I'll follow.
All right. So obviously it should be a humanoid.
Okay.
Because what's the point of any robot that's not a humanoid?
We want to get VC funding. It
Yep.
should be a humanoid. All right.
And I think this humanoid will have a bunch of fuel and near speed of light travel. We put it into orbit. It looks out onto the stars that it sees. Uses all available information to pick one at random for where it should head towards.
Okay.
And then it needs to get there and figure out what to do.
So your training data acquisition will span in the multiple millennia of like get to the star, figure out if it was worth it, get back, get to the next one. So like, Mr. VC, could you invest $500 million to maybe see a return 4,000 years from now?
I don't think 500 million would be enough.
Dearly enough.
Well, okay, but like I think more interestingly, like a robot of some sort, maybe it's humanoid, maybe it's not, has gotten to another solar system.
Okay.
And kind of similar to Boboverse or similar to some other things, it needs to figure out what to do now that it's in that.
How about just like the moon or Mars, like our solar system? More return on investment this side of this millennia. How about that? What do you think?
Well,
David?
I thought you already came up with a really tough problem for a foundational model, which is how do you train a model to figure out where to go when it takes you, light years of travel,
thousands of years.
Each training example,
And even your synthetic training data is sci-fi books.
Yep. Which are famously accurate. It's going to assume that every planet it goes to has Star Trek like humanoids.
So I think we're like from the get-go, we're absurd enough that we can reel this into being more realistic.
Okay.
So let's say we're sending a probe beyond 1 light year.
Okay.
So like teleop is not an option.
Yeah.
And let's say on the other side, whether it's Alpha Centauri or a really far away sun that we could get to within 1,000 years. Let's say there definitely is intelligent life on the other side.
How do you know? Like
No, like
just presupposed.
We send it to some star outside of teleop range, and in that star there is intelligent life, or
Right.
in orbiting that star there is intelligent life. We know nothing else.
Okay.
We don't know if that intelligent life is carbon based, if it speaks English, if it speaks Wookiee.
Well,
if
obviously it's going to speak English.
Yeah, and I mean, like, but we know nothing about how it communicates, what that language looks like. We know nothing about what type of life, like what type of intelligent life. And to be clear, when I say intelligent life, I want cool aliens, which I define as like World War II era technology or beyond.
Okay.
I'm not interested in single cell life.
Yeah.
I'm not really interested in caveman aliens. I want like cool aliens are on the other side of this 1 to 1,000 year journey.
So what are you driving at here?
Let's talk about how we would train, to David's point, a model based on only the information available to us today that could theoretically do anything at all productive with these mystery aliens.
Right on. So just to put a pin in what's productive, would one productive thing be bringing intelligent life with it? Like, I think there's plenty of robot problems.
Yeah.
Just in getting a vehicle there, and what if we could support a human at the same time? And
Yeah, I mean, but like then we have to create cryo stuff. Like I think maybe this is like the first contact drone.
okay,
So like all it has to do is like figure out like how to communicate with mystery aliens on the other side.
right on. I
wonder-
retract the human.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if like, assuming math is mostly the same everywhere in the universe, and assuming these aliens have gone through some level of EMI, like electromagnetic communication.
Yeah.
If you just tapped into World War II and later data,
Yep.
could you even theoretically apply? We could try this experiment today on planet Earth. Like stick an antenna in the air, plug it into an LLM, and just see what comes out the other side. Could it even figure out encoding schemes and anything rational out of just raw EMI spectrum? Right.
I like that. I wonder if we could also count on the folks on the other end to be working hard to
Do something.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's reasonable to think that if we put ourselves in orbit around the sun and started spitting out radio waves,
I think we get shot down.
no, they'd either shoot us down and in which case we've learned something. We've learned there is intelligent life there.
We've learned there's intelligent life like us.
Yeah.
On other
But I think
stars.
more realistically, like if it's, at 2AU or 4AU, somebody would start talking to it. And basically we need to machine learn our way into figuring out how the radio waves work. Or maybe we don't. Maybe we just assume they have to adapt to us. And figure out like how to have that first conversation.
I think you know how you get this funded? You fund this as an effort of like the NSA.
Yeah.
Of like stick an antenna in the air and see if it can decrypt anything. Like it's probably not going to break serious encryption, but can it break like World War II era, ciphers?
Yeah. But I mean, like how, like,
Might be interesting because if it could do that, it could probably has a decent bet of understanding at least that this information is interesting somehow. It might not know what the content is, but it might like see like, oh, there's repeating patterns here and they come in some amount of frequency and like there's something interesting. Send it back home to be like there's something interesting happening.
Unsupervised code breaking.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like what would be really interesting. I don't know. Like I think like what I'm trying to lean towards is, let's say we just circled the sun at 3AU and published an analog stream, an analog video stream. Sorry, hear me out. An analog video stream that just showed like the images on the Voyager probe.
Yeah, okay.
And we just published that nonstop for 1 day to 50 years.
Yeah,
figuring eventually they'll see that, they'll get some understanding for how to talk to us.
Okay.
They start talking to us. They start talking to this probe. And now you have a AI agent that has to figure out like how they might be talking and what we should say.
I think if we presuppose we're transmitting a message, the most natural thing for them to do would be to respond in the same encoding. So like you don't need an AI agent.
Okay, no, but you need an AI agent to go from you've solved the encoding to like how do you actually communicate? Right?
I don't know. What do you think, dude?
I mean, we have no understanding of the baseline of this language.
On the where you start, which is you start by transmitting something super obvious, like like a Fibonacci series or something, and wait for somebody to start sending back nice mathematical things, and then we're to Stefan's hard problem, which is once you've done that, how do you turn that into a meaningful conversation?
How do you get some level?
Yeah, I mean, so like.
That would be really interesting. Like if you feed, because I keep hearing all these fluff pieces about like AI agents inventing their own language whenever they're talking to each other.
Yeah.
Like I wonder how much of that would be if you fed it an artificially generated alien language, would it be able to eventually figure it out? That's kind of an experiment you could run here.
Or a constructed language of which there is no online data.
Yeah.
I mean, like you could commission someone to build a constructed language and say like AI figure this out.
Yeah.
And figure this out with no common material.
So I think the main problem you're going to run into here is that any AI that we've trained is necessarily predisposed to how humans think.
Yeah.
And if this like other society thinks fundamentally differently, then like you might hit a barrier that you just can't cross. Like if they have no sense of sight, and they describe everything in terms of touch,
or
like,
if it's
we don't have a library to build up like,
or if it's Tarnock and Gelada Tanagra.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's
Star Trek reference. David looked confused.
an alien race who only speaks in
metaphors.
Yeah. Their whole language is just metaphors, and no one can understand. I mean, I wonder if you could take synthetic data actual data of sci-fi stories that talk about aliens, make synthetic data off of it to go increasingly weird and broad. Like have AI create increasingly weird aliens in science fiction and use that as your training set for how aliens might look. There's a chance that the actual alien is so incredibly far outside of that set that you never be able to figure out.
Yeah.
But I have a thesis in general that like intelligent life is going to look more close to similar everywhere than more different everywhere. And that like we can debate that thesis separately. But if that thesis was correct, I think it becomes a solvable problem. And like we can suddenly have like a really dumb ChatGPT talking to aliens on behalf of us.
Well, have you read Hail Mary, that book?
I certainly haven't.
No, so it's the same author that did the Martian. Thank you. And his kind of thing was, here's this alien society that doesn't even have sight, right? And so they do everything through echolocation.
Yeah,
and like they don't understand. No, that's very reasonable.
I think that is a silly premise. We've argued this before.
No, okay, so it's very reasonable if you evolve on a planet that's not well lit. Like what the heck?
If you design a planet for this, sure. However, my suspicion is that's not how it would ever work out.
Well, okay, so when Nicole's telling us to wrap up, but I just want to put in a completely separate pitch.
Okay.
So when we had discussed this idea of AI for exploration, space exploration, I immediately went to like this current obsession with Mars. And how you really need to solve it is you need your next Martian lander to run a local model that anything it photographs, it just transforms the image into like retirement communities. This is what it could look like in this area. Strip malls. Like invest now, buy your beachfront property on Mars. And like that is the lucrative.
I mean, I think more than that, we could just have it look at features on Mars, use model fitting from features on Earth to say, to tell people there's going to be a lot of oil if you drill here.
Oil.
Just say like, based on how this mountain looks on Mars, similar mountains on Earth have oil nearby.
That would be a really fun thing. Like,
great April Fools.
That'd be great. Like, I saw AI agents discovering like buried structures using LiDAR maps or depth maps on Earth, right? Like on Earth, like this is like now an archaeology technique, like satellite archaeology, and some of it's reasonable and some of it's like pretty good and some of it's like noise. But I'm saying apply that immediately to Martian surfaces and see how many like archaeological features you detect on scans of the Martian surface.
The
answer should be zero, right?
I still like my probe idea because like if for example you took this and combined it with a Van Neumann probe that builds more of itself every time it goes to a solar system.
Van Neumann's, is that the one that gives you more shoes every time it builds itself? Or are you talking about von Neumann?
Von Neumann. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't pronounce Neumann the right way. If you combine it with a Van Neumann probe.
I didn't take math classes.
Yeah, I know. My math ducked out early. If you combine it with a Van Neumann probe, we could theoretically make something that long outlived humans and could share whatever value our collective knowledge is with any future intelligent life. And then, to be a jerk like you are, the fact that we have yet to run across one of these probes that just orbits outside Mars that tells us how aliens figured out how to split the atom is an argument for us, in fact, being alone in the universe.
Yeah. What do you think, David? Are we alone in at least in our galaxy, let's say? Is there other intelligent life today in our galaxy? What's your bet?
You know, my favorite answer to this came from musician. What's his name? He tells this story about a conversation with another fella about exactly that same thing, and the story's not going to work, so I'm just going to stop right now.
Well, what's the pithy statement?
The pithy statement is that I think there's life all over the place, but it doesn't last long enough. So it's not that we're searching in a three-dimensional space; we're searching in a four-dimensional space, and it's much harder to find people.
You're a great filter guy.
Oh.
Yeah. Whereas I presuppose the answer I want and justify it backwards. Of I want there to be a cool life in the universe. So I'm willing to come up with constructed theories to make it make more sense.
All right, L. Ron Hubbard.
If you buy my takeaway course, I'll teach you how to talk to it as well.
This whole podcast is a slow burn towards the course. Thank you for joining us on this adventure, David.
Oh, now I regret agreeing to join.
Yeah,
all right.
That's a headline tomorrow. Great roboticist David joins us to
create cult.
Yes. Cool. All right. Now on to the main story.
So now that I'm not allowed to talk about space probes anymore, David, tell us what. So Ilya's joking question on why he got into robotics was nice and compelling. What prompted starting Carnegie Robotics? And I feel like people only ever start a company, let alone a robotics company, with great expectations of how quickly everything will go perfectly. So like what confluence of factors led to starting the company, and where did you think it would be by some reasonably short timeline thereafter?
Right on. So the starting the company, the answer is easy. We were at Carnegie Mellon University doing robotics. And in the early 2000s, I think it was getting increasingly obvious that the center of mass in robotics is going to shift from academia to industry. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was a little bit driven by fear more than anything else. I didn't want to get when the bulk of robotics funding started to be commercial, I didn't want to be
left out of the cool
trying
stuff.
to compete from a university.
Yeah.
And no, it turns out there's still a lot of great stuff going on in the university. So I guess I was paranoid. But that's what made me move my feet. And
how quickly did you think that shift was going to happen? How big did you think at the time? Did you do it because you thought 95% of the university funding would be private company funding within 3 years? So it was oh holy crap, this is happening now, or was it the exciting stuff's going private, I'm going to go private?
Well, it wasn't so much that. I guess I imagined that by 2025, Carnegie Robotics would be like a multinational.
Yeah.
And certainly that hasn't happened, and it doesn't seem like it's happened to there aren't real giant winners in the robotic space yet.
Yeah.
And a lot's gone slower than I imagined. For example, I think Stefan, you and I both took swings at the self-driving market.
Yep.
And a lot of interesting stuff came out of there, but it didn't mature at this. I remember saying, by 2020 we're all you're gonna be seeing cars on the road all the time. And
in 2014, people were saying 2013, people were saying their 8-year-old kids weren't going to get driver's licenses, and now of course those kids have driver's licenses and might already be on their second car. I guess from a technology perspective, what ended up being harder than you thought it was going to be in 2010, or what do you think the market found harder than it seemed like it would be in 2010?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I guess for me, my answer to what's hard is much more personal than you're asking about the robotics market, and I feel like the hard thing is reading the twists and turns of what the world's going to be hungry for, right? Because you've only got like if you, in I have this metaphor of your life being a match, and you can strike yourself wherever you want. And so if you happen to strike yourself in a dry burning field, or a dry field, and you can have a huge impact. But if you strike yourself in a parking lot, it's nothing. And if you strike yourself in a forest fire, it's also nothing, because in either case, you haven't changed the world very much. And just every now and then you hear about people out of luck more than I think than vision doing that at the right time. And then you get Microsoft, and you get and a little bit the self-driving craze felt that way too. Like, oh, the stuff I'm doing is important because it's really changing. Yeah. It's changing the trajectory at a time when it's very sensitive to small inputs. But I mean, like, knowing where that's going to happen, boy, that's a hard problem.
But I mean, like, we're now 10-ish years post GM's acquisition of Cruise, which I think I count as like the trigger from it's cool with stories about it to there's a whole bunch of money pouring in. And I don't think this is someone started working on it and there's a lot of people who wanted it. I think there's I think there's like a fundamental mismatch between how hard these problems are to solve and how multivariable and multidimensional these problems are to solve than people like think they are at the outset. And I guess my question, if you think back to your 2010 self, which problems did you think were going to be trivial or an afterthought, or of course we'll get to that, that like you might still be working on now, or might have taken many more years?
Yeah, I was going to ask kind of the same flavor of question, but like, why didn't the self-driving market succeed?
Or why didn't it succeed in 2010 or 2012?
Or hasn't
Man,
yet?
so those two questions go together so well, because my answer to what did I think was going to be quicker and easier, I guess I really thought the whole safety problem would move faster than it has. Like,
that's interesting. I
imagined there would be more of an exponential curve to safety technology.
And when you say, like, because safety is a big field, what do you think of in particular? Like sensing, compute, legislation, like what level?
Let me ignore that question and just answer it in the way that's most fun for me.
Cool. Cool.
Which is when we build a robot today and we have to, and we want to make it safe, we go through this dance of careful analysis and considering all it's like a big labor intensive and slow, expensive path. And that's roughly the same thing we did 15 years ago or 20 years ago or 25 years ago, or like, that's something that hasn't really changed a lot.
The FMEAs rhyme, but they need to be rewritten.
Yeah.
And I think David's point is just even the fundamental process here.
Yeah.
And so like cutting edge is like dependency management and failure trees and things like that, but there's no real like actual automation here.
And there's
it's still humans sitting in a meeting room arguing about how likely.
I imagine we get technologies that accelerate that process, and then they get better at it, and before long, the process, like the process of doing safety, would itself start to be automated.
Like safety has ended up being non-fungible from one use case to another, and like it's not yet. Like no one's really been able to sell. Here's magic safety. Build whatever robot you want. Add in this tiny little repo, and it won't hurt anyone.
Yeah, and to a large extent, you still do it with a pencil or a keyboard.
Yeah.
Like, and that's also
that's something we had talked about a bunch. Is can we turn safety into actually a kind of continuous integration, continuous delivery process?
Yeah.
Of like inputs in through a whole software delivery pipeline with unit tests, with delivery and things like that. And we're still slowly executing on that. But like that's a long-term vision. That's something we want to open source eventually.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Like there's groups that are starting to put together some of the automated tooling. Like there's even startups out of YC that are looking into this sort of stuff, but they're all sort of automating compliance management, and they're not really automating the like, how do you make a safety case in the first place, which I think is more what you're talking about.
And I think part of the challenge with many of those companies is the market to obviously solve are the markets where people do fairly known and understandable compliance.
Where it's pretty cookie cutter.
Like, what are the rules around people walking around a giant blade or a giant piece of weight? Not like, how do I think about when it's okay to take the person out of this multi-thousand-pound vehicle that drives at fatal speeds?
Right on. And that's the tie back to the other half of the question. You said, Ilya, what was one of the blockers on self-driving technology? Boy, I think that was a big one.
That's fascinating. I mean, another question that I have, like, given the time period that we're talking about, especially, how have you seen the tool, like, outside of safety, how have you seen the tooling ecosystem change over the last 15 years? Like, because, like, obviously there are more purchasable ruggedized computers and more purchasable sensors, but was it a slow ramp and then an exponential? Was it nothing and then like 2018 hit and there's a whole bunch? Like, what did you experience in terms of what you can buy versus build?
So the slow ramp versus exponential question is like, I like to think of that as just like, where are you on the exponential, or actually where are you on the sigmoid? So from my personal experience, the change I see in terms of robotics, you said tooling, but I think like how you do robots, I guess, is the way I'm thinking about it, is that a bunch of the stuff that used to be special is just commodity now. Like a lot of like LiDARs, for example.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm stretching the truth. It's not quite true that LiDARs are commodity, but they're moving that way.
They are. I mean, they've settled on a sort of cylindrical shape with a sort of similar amount of beam, sort of similar size, sort of similar power profile, similar-ish costs. Like they're. I mean, I agree with you. Like, back in 2010, there was practically one player, maybe two, right? And then there was legacy stuff from SICK and those kind of folks from the industrial market, which is like single plane, maybe safety rated, but safety rated in a very limited context. And now it's I
think we probably have like 5 different ones on active robots.
Yeah.
Right on. And in 2001, 2002, 2005, it actually made sense to build your own if you couldn't find the thing you were looking for. So that to me is the trajectory I see in robotics, and that we're trying hard to prepare for, is that when we started the company, we all felt really special because we had trained in a field that was pretty uncommon. And now, man, there are a ton of people in this field, and that's a great thing for robotics, right? As an industry, we're moving a lot faster now. But
I mean, given what you've seen, have you developed any heuristics for how to think about what might become commodity in 5-10 years versus what might actually be lasting and special for the next 5-10 years?
My heuristic for picking what's going to be commodity is I think of what seems exciting and just challenging enough that I can just about take it on, and then I assume in 5 years that's going to be just old hat.
Yeah, that's a good way.
Yeah,
it's depressing, but I think it's fairly true.
Yeah, but I mean, I think like the similar thing can be said for like people working in like web dev in the late 90s. Where like a lot of like the gnarly problems there are now solved by standalone companies that are worth billions of dollars. That used to be you'd have someone spend months building a server infrastructure, and now that was hard and challenging, and now it's just a thing you can buy.
Right on. So, but you took us right back to something we talked about earlier, this like, how do you predict the market thing? Yeah. I guess my feeling is that there's a lot of chaos in complicated systems like a robotics market. And so the farther ahead you look, the more vulnerable you are to getting faked out by difficult to predict motions in the market.
Like false starts, basically, you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And who knows what thing is really going to hit, and that I think a great example now is generative AI is really having a huge impact, and it's making everything take a left turn that I certainly didn't predict. And so that's back to the story. Like the things I can anticipate and that seem exciting to me are going to get easy. It's because of the 8 billion people in the world. Some percentage of them are all focusing on the same interesting stuff, and it's the surprise turns that are going to be the real challenges.
Yeah, let alone the surprise turns out I don't actually. I mean, my pocket theory for the Apple self-driving car program has long been that they kicked it off 2015, 2016-ish because, hey, we're Apple, we're a big company, it takes 5 years to do anything. And the really hard problems in general robotaxi will obviously be solved by the time we're ready to ship this car in 2020, 2021. And that's, that's an interesting thought of the further out you are, the more likely you are to lose time to fit that big starts.
Well, I'd love to get your perspective, because this is something Stefan and I debate a bunch. Is I saw this firsthand at Amazon, where there's a little bit of hubris on like Amazon shipped devices before, millions of them. Like it's not a big deal for us to build a home robot. Like we're just going to build a home robot, we're going to ship it, no problem. And like it was a big deal, and it took way more money and way more time. And like, what is the weird thing about robots that trips up robots, autonomous vehicles, whatever, right?
Trips up big companies full of smart people.
Yeah, trips up big companies that have the capital and intelligence and market leadership to actually should be to do them.
Like an easy way to think about it, actually, as a quip, is Amazon has 30,000 office workers, not including warehouse people.
Yeah.
They hire really smart people. Yeah. Like Amazon, it is probably a real number that Amazon employs 2,500 to 10,000 geniuses.
Probably.
Like is a real number.
Yeah. Like distinguished engineer level people.
Yeah, or just like people with IQ over 140. That's stupid. I think we all work around a lot of smart people to realize there's lots of different levels of intelligence, blah blah blah. But like, what makes it so that a company with 2,500 geniuses can flub something like that?
And to put in my own poke, but David, disagree with me if you want. I don't believe it's hardware. Like Apple, Amazon know how to ship hardware, know how to beat the market down to volume numbers, and like I don't believe it's hardware. Like, but maybe I'm wrong. What do you think?
No, I'm with you. Hardware is hard, but it's not a deal breaker, because I mean we all use it every day and it works great, right? Can we? I haven't thought about this question, but I wonder, can we force it into a requirements kind of problem?
Yeah, go for it.
What are the requirements for a robot?
Yeah, because I want to like ask you also about the DoD stuff, so we can like drift into like how requirements work for the DoD world.
Yeah, like if I write the requirements for another piece of hardware, like a cell phone, like especially an early cell phone when it was just a cell phone, it's not impossible. You can imagine writing down all the things you want it to do. But a robot, it's often a lot harder, because the range of environments and things that can happen, the reactions you want it to have, they're all, it's difficult to comprehensively specify how the darn thing should behave. And
like
so
the problem
I'm just
space is
spitballing
more multidimensional, basically. Like a cell phone, like
battery
life. Yeah, well, but I mean, like cell phones, like battery life, signal quality, size, quality, component quality, weight, whatever. But like a robot is like that plus like what's your environment look like? How fast is it? Blah blah blah. So it's just more dimensionality to the problem. I
a radio has a simple job, and a robot has the job of like do the right thing, but the right thing depends on whether it's raining or whether, if you just saw your mother-in-law, or, there's a whole bunch of things that affect what the right thing is.
Yeah. The mother-in-law is the enable the kill mode, right? Like just to be clear, is that word?
My mother-in-law is the best, so.
Mine too, to be clear.
I feel like there was a lot of CYA that just happened. Like an incredible amount. Like Like I'm sure, like when we talk about like, oh, how do DoD programs go, there will be far less CYA than like the mention of slight negative feelings towards the mother-in-law. Like, oh, the military, oh, they're terrible, but my mother-in-law is the best.
Yes.
And if she's listening right now, I appreciate the socks I got for Christmas.
Exactly.
But in all honesty, I did luck out with my in-laws.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like we should talk about the DoD.
Yeah.
So
that's a much less sensitive.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe to frame up the DoD question. Maybe to start, I feel like a lot of people who have never done anything with the DoD think about robots in the DoD as like a free money machine. Like you walk somewhere vaguely near the Pentagon and you say, I work on robots. And a general walks out with a big
novelty
check with $100 million, and
and it just has 4 robot things. Like that's the memo line, like 4 robots.
And 6 months later, you've deployed 100,000 robots throughout some area that's important to the DoD. I mean, like how
close is that to reality?
Obviously far. But I guess my question is like how does working with that group differ from when you guys work on commercial things, work on things with yourself, just from a like how technical architecture, product design, things like that end up working? How far different is that from when you're working under different constrained environments?
Wow, so there's a lot of questions in there. I got to respond to the first one, which is the free money machine one, which is. And that has not been my experience, and it actually gives me a lot of respect for the government. For a while, it was surprisingly easy to get like a small amount of money. Like you could get like when there weren't a ton of people in the robotics space, and the government understood that this is something that that the DoD in particular was gonna need. Then there were lots of solicitations. You could get money to get started pretty easily. But to actually field thousands of robots it's a much more complicated process than you imagine from the outside because there's the folks who fund the research and the R&D are different from the folks who are using the robot, and the folks who write the requirements for what the folks who are using the robot get are yet another group, and then the funding comes from another group, which is in Congress, and there are a lot of moving parts, and they all have to agree before something gets fielded in quantity. And I actually think that's a good thing because a lot of different parts have to agree, and you don't make anytime you have single points of decision, you're more prone to stupid decisions.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a point there. Like the people who actually use the robot are very different groups than the people who fund it or the people who design it. And like closing that loop, I've found is extremely difficult. Of even the basic, like how does the UI look? I mean, like this is our best guess. We've done some field tests, but the people who actually use it on the front line have a totally different understanding of the universe, and their feedback is very valuable. But actually pulling it back in is very difficult in my experience.
I mean, I guess like robots are phenomenally hard products to actually get out the door. How do you kind of square that circle between the functions an end user wants, the functions that are on the requirements doc, and the functions that are theoretically possible with a robot in the next 18 months?
So I'm in danger of taking a tangent here because you mentioned the requirements doc.
We never do that on the show.
Never.
It's unusual.
Right on.
Straight line.
I got 2 tangents to go on. I'm going to take the short tangent first.
All right.
And I'll illustrate with an example. We built a robot that we're quite proud of that finds buried explosives like landmines and IEDs. And
absolutely.
And actually, you probably saw my face light up a bit when you were talking about searching for architecture under the ground using ground penetrating. That's exactly what this robot does, and it piggybacks on work that was done by the folks who make the handheld detectors that unfortunate soldiers carry around looking for landmines. This was something we were and are proud of, but it brings up another interesting point in fielding technology, not just with the government, but I guess in the world, is that the world changes as you develop the stuff. And there's a fairly involved process of going from concept to production item, especially when you're doing it under government funding, because there's some weight to that process that slows it down a bit for good reason. That's another soapbox I'd love to jump up on. But during that time, the challenges of the world can change. For example, you might develop a robot during a time when there's a lot of Middle East conflict to think about.
Counterinsurgency operations where people are leaving landmines and other random explosives around.
Exactly. And then we've had sort of in the world of countermine, we've had a little whiplash. Like the U.S.'s attention turned a lot to near peer conflicts in like Eastern Europe, the kind of thing that's happening in Ukraine. And for a while, that looked like long range precision fires. Like how far can you shoot a
artillery
cannon?
Piece?
But now it's switching back towards like there's now interest in countermine, because at least I don't know quite what's happening with the Carter administration, but in 2024 there's a lot of concern about what's happening in Ukraine, and I have no inside track here, but my impression is that countermine was a real concern.
Or even the whole drone aerial thing has moved quickly enough that there's now interest in this. There's a lot of $2 million mobile radar equipment that gets taken out by a $200 drone with a grenade strapped to it. And it's like, at that point, it doesn't make sense to make your equipment that expensive and not static.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear. So, David, we'd love to hear some stories about if you're a roboticist, you're going to have demos that go really well, surprisingly, and the default state is demos that go horrendously wrong in often hilarious ways. I'd love to hear some of your war stories.
Wow. Okay. So we're going to talk about the maturity of robotics as an industry. Right?
Oh, we discuss this all the time. Sorry, quick tangent. Our tell is always like, oh, you have an autonomous truck? Can it turn itself on? No? You need a human to go into it and turn itself on? It's not an autonomous truck, my man.
Yeah. Like, oh, okay. You guys are currently testing with people either in the vehicle or very close.
Yeah. Very close monitoring of this autonomous truck. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, please.
Right on. So I think the one metric of how mature an industry is how often the demos go poorly. Because like as the industry gets more mature, there's more process to the development, and it gets to be like, okay, we're going to crank this one out, and there's no.
I guess how do you factor in fake demos into that? Not that anyone in robotics has ever done that.
Oh,
like with
my
lots
goodness.
of cuts and lots of what
like
have you.
Edits,
Yeah.
Did you see that like quadruped robot that came out of like Kawasaki or somewhere the other day?
Oh yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
So there was I think in the last week and a half. Let's edit out the name of the company.
Yeah.
A video was released of a person riding a quadruped over mountains and through streams. And
I saw this.
And like impossibly obviously not real.
Like very
there's no universe, and it was supposed to be hydrogen powered too. And I was like, there's no universe where this thing has the amount of energy required to move itself, much less its driver, gracefully and fluidly. Like we're talking like 9 feet leaps down forwards.
Was that a concept video, or was it ostensibly a?
I think it was pitched. I'm not sure. It might have been one of those runaway social media things where the original company pitched it as like, here's what it might be, and everybody took it as here's what actually exists. But what I heard was this was a pitch, not less of a concept.
Right on. So you asked about demos that go wrong, and there's one story. It's not really mine. I was working at CMU at the time, and my co-founder tells this story, and I've heard it enough times that I like it. And it has to do with at that time CMU was developing a couple of robotic platforms to demonstrate off-road autonomy in like real rugged world conditions. So think of like a 9-ton hybrid diesel electric 6-wheeled vehicle that can like drive over cars and climb.
Cool.
Was this like the DARPA Grand Challenge kind of timeline, or?
This was it was in that same neck of the woods. It was before the urban challenge. There was in like kind of overlapping
in the
that
gap
stretch.
year.
There was there was a series of DARPA first. They funded a program. We developed a robot called Crusher that we called it that because we had some cars we brought in the backyard and
awesome monster truck over them. Yeah.
And then that program went fairly well, and then Tartic funded a similar effort afterwards to take that technology and Tartic's now at GVSC and build a faster, more roadworthy version, maybe with a little less off-road capability, but still giant thing. And the story of what went wrong with the demo is, you can imagine like demonstrating this thing as a series of waypoints. So the vehicle's following waypoints down I don't know if it's an airport runway, something like that. And there's an off by one bug in the indexing of the waypoints, so that when you get to the very last one, you cycle back to hit the first at
oh no
50 kph.
Sorry, Elliot, for those listeners who are less technical than either of you.
So off by one is like a classic programming failure. So you think your array has 5 entries, but it actually has 4, that sort of stuff. So what he's talking about is he has a series of goals in an array, and it should go from the first to the last, but instead it went from the first through to the last and back to the first. And you can imagine if you've laid out a careful series of waypoints that has a curved path, and then you jump from the last one to the first one, you might go right through some stuff. Is what I'm guessing, but please continue.
Yeah, so it didn't go through anything. It's just a very spectacular turn at the end of the, and then followed by, I think, the safety system intervened and
kicking
so
in.
no harm done. The vehicle didn't roll, but lots of tires squealing and smoke and jaws dropping.
That's awesome.
How did you guys explain this to the watchers, the audience?
Oh, I think we were just straight up and like honest about it.
Just off by one.
But
that reminds me of, I think San Francisco tested out like autonomous train cars. And their first test, it was very similar. It was supposed to go from like station A to B and then let people off.
And this was for reference when San Francisco first developed the BART system.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a subway, kind of a regional transit. There was 2 stations, and it was going to be a fully autonomous rail system.
Yeah.
In, I want to say 1972, 1982.
Yeah, and it went from station 1, picked up VIPs, went to station 2, dropped them off, and was supposed to go back. And instead it continued onto a non-existent station off the rails.
Oh, no.
And to this day, BART, I think, has not automated any part of their system. So yeah, that definitely occurs. I mean, it's better than our first test tractor. Mm-hmm. We had
still the same test tractor.
Yeah.
No, give away the story.
Yeah, it's still the same test tractor, but when we were first bringing it up, the immediate Polymath was 2 months old. We're bringing up the very first system we have, and our integrator had put a safety emergency stop on it, as you should. And we take off on a farmer's field.
But we're now feeling good enough that we've done some Xbox controller
teleop tests
while someone's sitting inside the vehicle. And now we want to get our great demo video.
Yeah, we're like, let's get a video. So it starts driving. I lose connection to it. And it starts to just continuously drive right at a diesel fuel canister, like a big farm-sized diesel fuel canister. So it's like, oh. So then our integrator runs up, smacks the e-stop on the side. It keeps driving. because that was the one e-stop that was not wired in. So then he has to run around into the thing and pull the ignition. So luckily, okay, to be clear, it was going maybe a mile an hour. So it was like not particularly fast. Yes, but it was still less safe than I would have liked. So that's our first, very first polymath code deployed on a real system. After that, we've been very, very insistent on heartbeats on every single message we send. Heartbeats on everything.
Yeah.
So you guys support clients. So I know a decent amount of your work you guys do at your facility in Pittsburgh. But I know there's also clients, or I'm confident to say there's clients not in Pittsburgh. There's clients with robots out in West Nowheresville. How have some of the demos at the end of those weeks or months of you have 1 to 8 engineers in West Nowheresville with probably a 45-minute drive from the nearest motel to the robot every day, and there's a demo at the end of the week for whoever. How have some of those gone?
Oh, well, so my favorite Nowheresville memories, at least, aren't so much demos as explorations. There's a company we're affiliated with called Robot, spelled ROWBOT. And Robot is an agricultural robotics company. They build a vehicle that fits between rows of corn. And you can imagine that if you can navigate a cornfield autonomously, you can do all kinds of great things, like putting just the right amount of fertilizer you don't over fertilize, and it's not bad for the environment. And all, so early in that development, we were trying to just get a sense of what the environment's like, but it was and you imagine cornfields are everywhere.
Yep.
But this was, it was late in the season or something, and so all of the Midwestern cornfields had been harvested or done. So I might be wrong late or early, but the bottom line is, to get corn, we had to go to Florida. So
famous corn growing state, yeah.
Corn and oranges.
So and I just wanted to know what the robot's eye view was. And it turned out to be pouring rain. So we're driving around to cornfields, and every cornfield, I jump out of the car and I run across the ditch and I get into the cornfield and pretend I'm a robot that's about, 2.5 feet tall. So I'm crawling around thinking, like, what kind of an idiot goes crawling around Florida cornfields when it's wet? Like, there's got to be alligators.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm surprised the gator didn't get you in the irrigation ditch.
So I made it through that. There are no gator encounters. I guess there's no real punchline to this story, except that it's one of the few times in my robotics career that I've thought, am I doing something really stupid here? And it turned out, actually, the biological hazard of that trip was we stayed in a hotel that had bedbugs.
Oh, no. Jeez.
And didn't realize it until
back when
morning.
I was doing Starsky, we did a lot of our testing in Florida, and in Central Florida, there's a time of year that I with a gun in my head, I couldn't tell you accurately what it is, but where it is essentially called love bug season, where there's these insects that breed, and they're like everywhere. They're kind of like cicadas if you've spent time in the Northeast during cicada season. And at Starsky, we were doing a demo for, I want to say it was CNN. And the love bugs are, I'm sure this isn't the biologically correct term, but sexually attracted to carbon dioxide and white paint. So our white truck driving on the highway is covered in these insects. And I'm thinking the whole time, we were primarily a perception-based system. I'm thinking the whole time, how there's these bugs right on our cameras.
In your cameras.
How is this going to possibly work? And I don't know. Someone explained it to me as the light diffraction went around the bugs because of how close they were. I don't understand how it did work. The demo went well. It was on TV, but I still to this day don't know how we didn't all die.
They made it blurry, but not opaque.
not awful.
So I'll finish the bedbug story because it ties back to the the 9-ton autonomy platform.
Yeah.
Environmental testing for that platform required a giant thermal chamber. You can imagine a thermal chamber big enough that you can put a good sized car in it. So the bedbug remedy then is you come back with your suitcase full of knows how many, and you don't want to take it into your house. So I just
the thermal chamber.
ran straight for the thermal chamber.
I think that counts as embezzlement. I'm just saying it. I think you embezzled a thermal chamber.
I certainly spent
It's a travel expense. It's fine. You put it down under mileage, right? Like 0.1 miles across the thermal chamber. Yeah, but why thermal testing? You guys obviously focus on outdoor ruggedized platforms. Like what sort of problems do you have to face in these sort of environments?
Right on. Well, you know this from building robots that go out and work outside. There's always, you got to work under a range of environmental conditions, and then there's on top of that there's solar load, and then there's you never know when it's going to be whether there's going to be wind or if it's going to be still, and what the humidity is going to be. This is actually counterintuitive. That wet air, especially at high temperatures, is less thermally conductive than dry air. And you can imagine.
Oh yeah, because water absorbs heat.
Well, it's more like, if you think about it this way. I'm making this up. I don't actually know that this is the right explanation, but it sounds right to me.
Yeah. The podcast listeners will take whatever we say verbatim as truth.
Right on. Think about the universal gas law. Like it's basically saying like molecules of gas behave like a molecule counts as a molecule. So if you take some of those nitrogen molecules, the N2, and replace them with water's quite a lot lighter than nitrogen. So the two kind of counterintuitive things there. One is wet air is less dense than dry air, and the other is that and this is the part I'm really stretching, is that wet air is less thermally conductive than dry air.
Well, no, like the second one makes sense to me because like water has a particularly high specific heat
enthalpy. Yeah, well that's
duh, Nicole. Enthalpy.
All right.
But like that makes sense that wet air is.
I that's pretty counterintuitive to me, because the high enthalpy means that it takes a lot of energy to vaporize it, which means that but this is already vapor though. But like why you sweat, right, is because you put out some water and then it evaporates and it takes a huge amount of heat off of you because it takes so much energy to vaporize it. But I guess once it's already a vapor.
Well, it takes a lot of heat on me because as the sweat bubble beads out, heat is now on my skin instead of under my skin.
No. I mean, sure, but the main thing is the evaporation. It's the fact that transforming a liquid to a gas, especially water, takes a huge amount of energy, and so that's what's cooling you down.
Yeah, I think this is sauce.
Stefan only believes in radiative heat. There's no such thing as convection or conduction, just radiative heat transfer. This is why he's so full of hot air.
Yeah, my chem teacher, my high school chem teacher, I'm still afraid of. So I don't know.
I'm going to assume his name is Mr. Morris. Mr. Morris, if you're listening, be very disappointed in Stefan.
This is over.
All right, there you go. All right, one last question.
Terrifying what lady?
One last question. Where do you see the future going for Carnegie Robotics? What's the main driver for the next 5 years? Aside from becoming that multi-billion-dollar global company.
What are you most excited about that you guys are working on right now?
Oh, those are two different questions. The thing that I see us, what we're shooting for is we want to be the enablers for the next generation of robotics companies. So there's a ton of hard problems that new robotics companies are digging in on. And one of the blockers there is, do you have the right piece of hardware, and doing hardware is, we referred to this earlier, it's hard, and it's something that we, Carnegie Robotics, have invested a ton of effort into. And so with the idea that then, as this next generation of robotics companies is developing their solutions, maybe we can help them shortcut some of those learning and painful development of production capability. Like, if we can provide the pieces that our peers need, then I think everybody wins.
And yeah, let's dig into that. I know you guys have recently redone the website to be kind of more conducive to that. Can you talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, right on. We're a company full of engineers, and I think we have maybe 2 people now who have a business background instead of an engineering background. And so
these are my kind of folks. This is make me love you guys all the more, honestly.
Yeah, well, we spent like most of our lives like building stuff that not all of it was home runs, but we made some really good stuff, and just not even thinking about what does it take to sell the things that you've built. We just kind of like, word of mouth will work, everybody knows us, and so the website is one of a series of steps we're taking to get a little smarter about how to actually do business in the world. I forgot what the question was now, but maybe that answered.
I guess, like, I know on the website, like, you guys recently redid the website to be able to sell a number of your parts. Can you talk through what you have there, what type of things you guys are starting to offer to the rest of the broader community, just to make it so you guys can do the commercial that you that your PR team almost certainly wanted this whole thing to be, instead of us talking about humanoids in space.
Stefan, you're so kind to me. You gave me that great introduction, and now you're giving me an opportunity to plug Carnegie Robotics. Thank you. So on the website, you'll see 3 things. You'll see sensing products. We make cameras, and we make GPS INS units, and we have a new generation of actually both of those coming out. You'll also see we've started to do ruggedized compute. There's a lot of people in that space, but there are just a few niches that aren't well populated. So we got some sort of military targeted ruggedized compute,
cool,
and a couple other things going in that direction.
Do any of them have out-of-band management?
I was just going to ask that.
Out-of-band management. I assume that means like Intel management engine kind of stuff.
Yeah, vPro or any of that stuff. But basically, any way where we can control the computer, even if the computer's off, re-image it, change configuration, that sort of stuff. It's usually done over Ethernet. It's like a server thing, but we're trying to get it more into robotics.
I don't know the answer to that question. The stuff we're mostly selling is ARM-based, and I'm not aware of ARM-based versions of that. But where there's a will, there's a way. So let's talk about that later.
Yeah. No, I mean, to give our request to any listener who might be listening, like, basically,
right on.
The reason we've cared is that we need the ability to re-image a dead computer in the field. Like, anywhere in the world, computer has fallen over for whatever reason. The hard drive failed, something got corrupted, who cares, right? We're just re-imaging it to update it. And so there's now, out-of-band management has been a standard thing in servers for decades now, literally, where there's nobody in a Google data center who comes over with a USB stick to stick it in and re-image a server. Like, that's ridiculous. All of it's managed through out-of-band. And we're trying to push that into robotics, and we have a few products, but they're very few and they're very selective and they're kind of expensive. But the main thing is that with this feature, you can just ship hardware and then in the field re-image it, reconfigure it for whatever. If it fails, recover. And this is one more of that step of like, make robots a real thing. Where imagine if your cell phone fails, that you have to like plug a USB stick to re-image it. It's ridiculous. Like, there has to be a bootloader. There has to be some way to actually recover the thing.
Functionally, I don't want to send any of our engineers to crawl through cornrows in Florida.
As corny of a story as that would make, we still don't want to do it.
I mean, I guess as
but wait. Let's continue. So you're saying there's 3 things. Sensing hardware.
So the third is like full-on autonomy and the platforms to go with it. So so another thing on our website right now is an off-road autonomy platform that you can buy in several flavors. You can buy it ready for
Nice.
and it's based on a Polaris RZR, but it's you can buy it ready for drive-by-wire. You can buy it with compute, or you can buy it with like all the bells and whistles. And we're working up to having stuff on our website related to the autonomy stack as well. So if you have your own platform, you can buy from us. But everybody's doing that right now.
Yeah.
So
But so with some of the stuff on the website, there are these components. I guess, how do you think about squaring that circle with folks who then might think they're competing against some corner view of what you guys do? So whether that's a team that's doing some SIBRs that are comparable to what you're doing at the DoD, a team that's selling some full stack autonomy compared to other programs you guys are doing with other commercial customers, how do you kind of grok that, like, oh, buy components of you, but they might think that you're somewhat of a competitor?
yeah, I love that question. I guess I recently heard someone say we all do better when we all do better. And I feel a bit that same way about the robotics community, that sure, we all compete in one sense, but here I am on your podcast, and it's good for both of us. And if somebody's competing with Carnegie Robotics in one corner of the space, and we can enable them by supplying a part, well, it moves robotics forward. It opens up more horizons for all of us, and what's not to like about supplying someone who's doing that? So,
awesome.
Yeah, totally. Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for joining the podcast today, and
thank you, David LaRose, for sharing your insights, your expertise here. Obviously, you've been in this field for a long time, so really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, incredibly honored to have you on, and thank you so much for the great conversation. Yeah,
thank you for inviting me, and like the honor is all mine. Really, I've enjoyed being here.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
So Ilya, now that I can finally...
now we play hot potato. So David LaRose, who are you calling to the who are you calling to the podcast next? It could be Larry Page. Just pick like a person.
Well, yeah, we have him standing by. Larry Page has been sitting right there the whole time.
Can you say the thing you were going to say while I think about a serious answer there? Because maybe there is something great.
Ilya, what are we going to talk about next week?
Well, we're going to talk about the serious answer that David is coming up with at this very moment.
And will be heavily baked in, and therefore incredibly important.
Yes,
that he answers it correctly.
Right.
All right. Well, moment of truth.
So I think you would very much enjoy talking to Yasser Sheikh if you can get him on the podcast, but it's a long shot because he's
what's his background for our listeners?
He's a perception guy. He does he was doing like virtualized reality kind of work at Carnegie Mellon when I met him. Yeah. He's now working for Meta. He's working in their sort of telepresence and next gen version of what we're doing now. Yeah. He's just such a smart, entertaining, fun guy to talk to. So
awesome.
I'll send him an email.
That'd be very appreciated. We'll start the chain up.
Look at Ilya being a proper podcast host instead of me just trying to make jokes.
That's okay. I'm used to it by now.
Well, David, thanks so much for joining us, and to everyone out there, thanks so much for listening to us this week, and we'll be back pretty soon, I think.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.